Princess Catherine was arguably the star attraction during the first day of the state visit after making her first banquet appearance in 2 years in a stunning red gown and a tiara.
Nobody saw this coming. Catherine walked into that banquet, and the moment people saw what was on her head, jaws dropped. A tiara so sacred, so fiercely protected by royal law, that even Queen Elizabeth herself only dared to wear it once. Reserved strictly for queens, until now.
Well, the British royals have posed for a new formal photograph. Of course, your eye is drawn to the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton, as it always is.
Yes.
You just can't help but notice her. You notice there, she's the only splash of color in this picture. But take a close look at her tiara.
Yeah.
That's one of Princess Diana's favorites. It's actually the one that she wore at her wedding.
So now she has the wedding ring for Princess Diana and now the tiara as
She
well.
looks stunning in it.
They all look stunning.
And Camilla, reportedly blindsided, furious, sitting right there in the same room, watching it all unfold in real time. Insiders are calling it the most audacious power move the palace has seen in years. So what is really going on behind those palace walls? On December 3rd, 2025, the British royal family gathered at Windsor Castle to host a state banquet in honor of German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier and his wife Elke Budenbender. It was a grand occasion by any standard: white tie, military orders, tiaras, and the full ceremonial weight that the British monarchy is known for delivering on nights like this. King Charles and Queen Camilla were there as hosts. Prince William stood alongside them, and then Catherine, Princess of Wales, walked in wearing something that stopped royal watchers in their tracks before the first course had even been served. The tiara on her head was Queen Victoria's Oriental circlet. It had not been seen in public for 20 years, and the moment photographs began circulating online, the conversation around the entire evening shifted to one central question: how is she wearing that? To understand why that question matters, you have to go back to where this piece of jewelry actually comes from. The Oriental circlet was commissioned in 1853 by Prince Albert as a gift for his wife, Queen Victoria. Albert had been inspired by design elements he encountered at the Great Exhibition of 1851. The lotus flowers, the Mughal arches, the intricate patterns he saw representing the breadth of the British Empire at that time. Gerard, the royal jeweler, translated those ideas into a tiara set with over 2,600 diamonds and opals, which were reportedly Prince Albert's favorite gemstone. It was a deeply personal piece created by a husband for his wife, and Queen Victoria treasured it accordingly. But she did more than treasure it. She placed a formal rule around it. In her will, Queen Victoria stipulated that the Oriental circlet tiara was to be worn only by queens and future queens. Not princesses, not other members of the extended royal family. It was designated a crown heirloom, meaning it would remain within the institution and pass from reign to reign, reserved exclusively for the women who would one day hold the most senior position in the monarchy. That rule held for over a century and a half. After Victoria, the tiara passed to Queen Alexandra, who made her own mark on it by having the original opals replaced with rubies, believing opals to be bad luck. From there, it went to Queen Mary, and then it became a favorite of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who wore it regularly throughout the reign of her husband, King George VI, including during their visit to Canada in 1939. After the Queen Mother passed away in 2002, her daughter Queen Elizabeth II inherited the piece but wore it publicly only once, at a state banquet in Malta in November 2005. After that single appearance, it went back into the royal vaults, where it sat untouched for 2 full decades. That is the history Catherine was stepping into when she appeared at the German state banquet on December 3rd, 2025. Every single woman who had worn that tiara before her had been either a reigning queen or a queen consort, without exception. And Catherine, for all the significance of her role as Princess of Wales and wife of the heir to the throne, is not yet either of those things. She is, according to royal protocol as it currently stands, a future queen consort, but not yet there. Royal commentators immediately picked up on this. Amanda Mata, speaking to Fox News Digital shortly after the photographs emerged, described the moment as genuinely exciting for royal watchers, noting that the tiara is one that is typically reserved for Britain's queens, and pointing out that it was also the largest piece Catherine had ever worn in her 14 years as a working royal. The court jeweler, which is widely regarded as one of the most detailed and accurate sources covering royal jewelry, named the moment the single best royal jewelry moment of 2025, describing it as a stunning surprise. Observers on social media and in royal coverage circles were equally struck by it, with many immediately noting the historical significance of a princess wearing something that a queen's will had restricted to queens. What made the visual impact even stronger on the night was how Catherine put the whole look together. She wore a floor-length sequin cape gown by Jenny Packham in a deep blue. Alongside the oriental circlet, she wore diamond chandelier earrings that had once belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth II, another layer of royal history resting on her shoulders that evening. She also wore the sash and star of the Royal Victorian Order and carried the royal family orders of both King Charles III and Queen Elizabeth II on her gown. It was a coordinated and considered look, and royal watchers who followed these appearances closely noted that nothing about it seemed accidental. The choice of the oriental circlet also carried a diplomatic dimension that made it particularly fitting for the occasion. The tiara was originally designed with strong German influences. Prince Albert, who commissioned it, was himself German-born. His connection to Germany remained significant throughout his life in Britain, and the design he helped inspire drew from international influences he encountered during the Great Exhibition. Wearing this piece to welcome a German president was, in the view of several commentators, a thoughtful and historically aware choice. It honored both the occasion and the heritage of the piece itself. But it is impossible to separate the tiara's appearance that evening from the wider context of what was happening around Catherine at the time. The German state banquet on December 3rd was not an isolated event. Earlier in the same week, Catherine had headlined her annual Together at Christmas Carol concert at Westminster Abbey. A widely shared festive photograph of her and William had been circulating warmly on social media. She was, across those days, one of the most visible and talked about figures in the royal family. And then she walked into Windsor Castle wearing the most historically significant tiara of her entire royal career. For anyone paying close attention to how royal families communicate through public appearances, the cumulative weight of that week was hard to miss. The monarchy has always operated through symbolism as much as through official titles and institutional function. Every appearance becomes a form of messaging. Every photograph gets analyzed. The order in which royals enter a room gets noted. Which jewels appear at which events carry meaning. This is understood within the institution, and it is understood by the public that follows it closely. The images from that December banquet were always going to generate analysis, and they did. It is also worth noting that Catherine had returned to public life in 2024 and 2025, following a period of absence after her cancer diagnosis and subsequent treatment. She had spoken openly about the experience in a personal video message that reached audiences far beyond the usual royal watching community. People who do not normally follow royal news had tuned in because of that announcement. When she came back to public duties, there was already a heightened level of public attention and emotional investment around her appearances. By the time December 2025 arrived, she was fully back in her role and making some of the most visually striking appearances of her royal career. The German state banquet was perhaps the peak of that. A tiara that had not been seen in public since 2005, worn by a woman who is not yet a queen, at a moment when the world was already paying closer attention to her than usual. The photographs from that evening circulated globally within minutes. They generated days of commentary, not just about the jewelry itself, but about what wearing it said about where Catherine stands within the monarchy and where the institution is heading as it moves further into a new generation of leadership. The tiara stayed on her head for the duration of the evening. The conversation around it has not really stopped since. The photographs from that December banquet were still circulating widely when reports began to emerge, suggesting that not everyone inside the palace walls had experienced the evening in quite the same way. According to sources speaking to Radar Online, Queen Camilla had not taken Catherine's tiara choice lightly. The word used by one insider to describe her reaction was furious. The phrase used to describe how she viewed the moment was an audacious power play. These are strong words, and it is worth being clear that palace sources speaking anonymously to tabloid outlets are not always reliable narrators of what actually happens behind closed doors. But the reason those reports spread so quickly, and the reason so many people found them immediately believable, says something important about the dynamics that already exist within this royal family in the public imagination. To understand why Camilla's reported reaction resonated with so many people, you have to think about what the evening actually looked like from where she was sitting. Camilla holds the title of Queen Consort. She is, by official definition, the most senior woman in the British royal family. She has been carrying out royal duties consistently since marrying King Charles in 2005. She has attended state banquets, supported charities, made international appearances, and done essentially everything the role demands of her. At the German state banquet that evening, she wore the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, an estimated $11 million piece with deep ties to Queen Elizabeth II, gifted originally to Queen Mary back in 1893 by a committee of young women who had fundraised specifically to mark the occasion of her wedding. It is a significant jewel by any measure, and Camilla wore it with the full complement of orders and decorations appropriate to her rank. And yet the conversation that evening and in the days that followed was not primarily about Camilla's jewels. It was about Catherine's. That contrast is at the heart of what makes this story so interesting, because it was not simply a matter of one woman outshining another in terms of visual impact. It was about what the specific piece Catherine chose communicated to anyone who understood its history. The Oriental circlet had been worn only by queens. Queen Victoria had written that into her own will, and Catherine, the future queen consort, had now worn it at a state banquet, while the current queen consort sat in the same room. Whether that was a deliberate message or simply a historically well-considered choice for a German diplomatic occasion, the symbolism was impossible for observers to ignore. The reports of Camilla feeling sidelined also need to be understood against the backdrop of a wider week, not just a single evening. Catherine had been highly visible across multiple days. Her Christmas concert at Westminster Abbey had drawn significant attention. A festive photograph of her and William had been warmly received and widely shared. She had, by the time she walked into Windsor Castle on the evening of December 3rd, already been at the center of the public conversation for several days in a row. Adding the most historically exclusive tiara of her career to that sequence of appearances was the kind of thing royal watchers were always going to analyze in the context of the bigger picture. Sources close to the situation, again speaking through tabloid channels and therefore to be taken with appropriate caution, suggested that it was the cumulative effect of that week that contributed most to Camilla's reported sense of being pushed to the margins. One insider told Radar Online that she felt sidelined within what was technically her own home. Windsor Castle is where King Charles and Queen Camilla host state events in their capacity as the reigning monarchs. For Catherine to have generated the most significant jewelry moment of the entire evening at a banquet hosted by the King and Queen is the kind of thing that, regardless of whether any friction actually occurred, was always going to be read as meaningful. There is a longer history here that also feeds into the public's interpretation of these moments. Camilla's relationship with royal jewelry has never been entirely straightforward in terms of how the public receives it. In the years following Diana's death, the public became deeply protective of anything connected to the late Princess of Wales, and Camilla found herself on the wrong side of that protectiveness on multiple occasions. Certain pieces she wore over the years prompted immediate speculation online about their origins, particularly when their design appeared similar to items Diana had been photographed in. Experts would typically phrase their observations carefully, noting that a design appeared consistent with a particular piece or that the timeline of when something entered the royal collection matched certain records. But the lack of complete transparency around royal jewelry history consistently fueled more questions than answers, and the public, which notices everything connected to Diana, kept asking them. The distinction that often gets lost in those conversations is that royal jewelry exists in different categories. Some pieces belong to the Crown collection and are loaned to members of the royal family by the institution. Those pieces were never personally owned by any individual, including Diana, and the palace has every institutional right to loan them to whoever it chooses. Other pieces are more personal, passed between family members or purchased privately, and the records around them are not always made fully public. That lack of clarity has fed speculation for years, not because anyone has proven anything improper, but because the people who follow royal history closely pay attention to details that are not always officially accounted for. What is different about the Oriental circlet is that the conversation around Catherine wearing it has very little to do with Diana at all. This is not a piece with a strong Diana connection. It is a piece with a strict historical rule attached to it, and Catherine wearing it raises questions not about the past but about the present and the future. It signals something about how Charles and the palace view Catherine's trajectory. Allowing a princess to wear a tiara that Queen Victoria's will restricted to queens is not something that happens without some level of institutional approval, whether that approval is explicit or simply the absence of any objection. The decision did not happen in a vacuum, and that is probably why it landed with such force when those photographs appeared. For people watching the monarchy closely, the message was not difficult to read. Catherine is being positioned, gradually and deliberately, as something more than simply the wife of the heir to the throne. She is being given access to pieces that communicate her future role before that role is officially hers. The Oriental circlet moment was, in that reading, less about breaking a rule and more about the palace quietly signaling that Catherine is already being treated as a future queen in all but the title. Meanwhile, Camilla continues to navigate a position that, despite her official rank, remains complicated in terms of public feeling. She has done the work required of her role. She has been consistent, professional, and by most objective measures effective as queen consort. But public emotional attachment is not something that can be earned simply through consistency and duty. It requires something else, something harder to define, and it is something that Catherine has managed to accumulate in a way that Camilla, for all her years of effort, has not fully achieved with large sections of the public. That gap shows up most clearly in moments like the German state banquet, when a single photograph can carry years of subtext inside it. Who wore what? Who generated which headlines? Who the cameras kept returning to? And which jewels sparked the most conversation? These things matter in an institution that runs, at its core, on symbolism and public sentiment. The palace knows this. The women involved almost certainly know this. And the public, which has been watching this particular dynamic play out for years, absolutely knows this. What December 3rd, 2025 made clear is that the generational shift inside the British royal family is not something waiting to happen in the future. It is already happening, one carefully chosen tiara at a time. And from the reports that followed, it seems that not everyone in that room felt equally comfortable with the pace of that change.